Isolated and under sanctions, are Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un planning a meeting to cement their alliance? The Russian leader badly needs weapons for his war in Ukraine. But what can Pyongyang offer, and how will the West react? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Imran Khan. The US says weapons negotiations between Russia and North Korea are moving forward. Reports suggest that a face-to-face meeting between the two leaders could happen this month. Not much is being said by either Moscow or Pyongyang, but their relations appear to be deepening and fast. Washington maintains that Moscow is desperate and is further isolating itself amid the war in Ukraine. So, is an isolated Russia more dangerous for the West? And will forging ties with North Korea give President Putin more leverage? We'll explore these issues with our guests in a moment, but first, this report by Katya Lopez-Hodillan.
It's a friendship that's causing alarm in Washington. Russia and North Korea, two increasingly isolated nations with a shared opposition to the West. The U.S. says President Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un may meet in Russia later this month. Moscow is looking for weapons for its war in Ukraine, and North Korea has plenty to sell.
Providing weapons to Russia for use on the battlefield to attack grain silos and the heating infrastructure of major cities as we head into winter, to try to conquer territory that belongs to another sovereign nation, this is not going to reflect well on North Korea, and they will pay a price for this.
In return for weapons, Pyongyang will likely want food, energy, and technology.
Russia clearly is needing to offer something to North Korea to get ammunition. It's not just straightforward, just purchase. And I would say as well that what we have seen too is that they're not getting what they need from China, which I think is very interesting.
The Kremlin has not commented on the prospects of a meeting. Despite sanctions and criticism, it's long defended its right to advance Russian interests with whomever it sees fit. Moscow has been turning to other heavily sanctioned nations such as Iran and North Korea for support, a move some analysts believe could be used as political leverage.
It's basically about sending a signal to Washington that Russia is capable of creating some additional trouble for the United States in East Asia. So the logic is, if the United States are excessively active in supporting Ukraine, Russia will probably start doing something to create a North Korean threat.
Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu traveled to Pyongyang in July. The visit, according to many analysts, was essentially a weapons shopping spree. Kim showed off his arsenal to Russian and Chinese government officials and displayed missiles banned by the United Nations. There's suspicion that North Korea has already provided Russia with artillery shells, rockets, and ammunition. The question now is whether more weapons and perhaps an alliance will follow. Katya Lopez-Hodillan for Inside Story.
Let's meet our guests in Seoul. Youngshik Bong, a research fellow at the Yongsei University Institute for North Korean Studies. He's also an advisor to the South Korean National Unification Ministry. In London is Julie Norman, co-director of the Centre on US Politics at University College London. And in Moscow, Sergei Markov, former Russian MP and a former spokesperson for Russian President Vladimir Putin. A warm welcome to you all. I'd like to begin in Moscow with Sergei Markov. The Russians officially haven't actually said anything about this meeting. The Americans are making a lot of noise about this potential meeting. What have you been hearing?
I think that some negotiation happening. The point for negotiation, the platform for negotiation is for the deal is absolutely clear. Russia interested to have shells because this war shows that consumption of shells are extremely high, and North Korea has a lot of reserves of shells for the possible war against South Korea and United States Army. So the Russian army needs shells, North Korea have shells. Also, possibly Russia will be interesting to have some of the workers from North Korea and possibly some of the soldiers from North Korea. North Korea interesting about getting out sanctions against North Korea, also some military technologies and some agriculture. But Russia is one of the main agricultural superpower in the world, so Russia can feed North Koreans very well. So it's the point for discussion. But also some of the interests should be taken account, not interests of United States, because more problems United States have, better for Russia. Also, no interest of the Japan and South Korea should be taken into account because these countries took part in the hybrid sanctions war against Russia. But interest of China and interest in other countries, first of all, big powers, members of BRICS and members of Shanghai Treaty Organization, also should be taken into account. First of all, interest of China. And this is the point, I think, for the negotiation. Also, possibly some bargaining, because was the equivalent of the lifting of sanctions and giving the shells. It's difficult to say, to calculate it.
Well, let's make that point to our guest in Seoul, Youngshik Bong. Our guest in Moscow is saying that actually South Korea and Japan and the US don't really have a say in any of this. This is two sovereign nations doing a deal with each other. What do you think?
Well, as two sovereign nations, so whatever will be negotiated, decided between Russia and North Korea, it's up to those two countries. And those two countries alone will be held responsible for the outcomes of any agreements that's possibly forged between two supreme leaders of the country, if the summit meeting is indeed going to take place. If Russia will provide advanced military weapon technology to North Korea, then it'll be Russia, not South Korea, crossing the red line first. Mind you that the Russian government already issued a stern warning to Yoon Suk-yeol government of South Korea that if South Korea will provide military weapons to Ukraine, then Russia will consider it as an official declaration of war to Russia, and Russia will provide military weapons to North Korea. But if Russia crosses the red line first, then South Korea will have free hands, and Russia will be accountable for the outcomes.
Julie Norman in London, it's a bit of a masterstroke on the part of Vladimir Putin. It's a deal that he's doing. There's very strict parameters to this deal if it happens. However, this is something that has the US concerned, but there's not a huge amount they can do about it, surely.
Well, that's exactly right. The U.S. has been watching this potential development of a close relationship between Russia and North Korea for some time, and especially this potential movement of arms from North Korea to Russia for the war. But you said it exactly. The U.S. already has sanctions on North Korea. They've already backed UN sanctions on North Korea. So it's obviously not a state that they engage with that much to be able to have any kind of real leverage, or right now with Russia either. So I think some in Washington are going to be watching China's movements with if and when this relationship develops, how much Beijing leans in or leans out of it, because they're really probably the state that has more leverage in this, and definitely much more than the U.S.
Sergei Markov, one of the things that's been brought up so far is this transfer of advanced weapons technology by Russia to North Korea. You didn't say that was going to happen. You talked about food aid, you talked about other types of aid, but you didn't talk about advanced weapons technology being transferred to North Korea. Do you think that might happen by Russia?
I think weaponry to North Korea, it's not North Korea interesting to have from Russia. But first of all, maybe some examples for the meaning, first of all, technologies. And by the way, the sanction against North Korea have been imposed to stop nuclear military program of North Korea. And that's absolutely clear. These sanctions doesn't work. So it's senseless, absolutely. And that's why North Korea will now have nuclear weaponry, and they have rocket missiles. So these sanctions could be getting out without any negative results. But military technologies will help North Korea to be more strong. And if there will be no sanctions, what reason not to give military technologies? It will be a great green light for such exchange. And North Korea interesting to have military technologies to produce more weaponry, to have more threat to the South Korea, to the Japan, and to the United States. Is it a problem? For Russia, not. It's even good because South Korea and Japan, they're junior partners of the United States, taking part in the hybrid war against Russia of all levels. That's why more problems to the junior partners of the United States is better for everybody for whom United States is enemy.
Youngshik, that's not quite a green light to give advanced weapons technology to North Korea, but certainly there's some wiggle room there to give some sort of weapons technology to North Korea. What does that do to South Korea? What's their response?
Well, South Korea's response to North Korea's continuous provocations and the weapon development has been strictly proportional. The key word here is proportional. So if Russia is not going to provide core technology for North Korea to help develop military satellites and nuclear propelled submarines, then South Korea's response jointly with the United States and Japan will be proportional. But if Russia stops at providing North Korea only with food aid and invitation to trilateral military exercises with China, then that's not going to satisfy the urgent needs of North Korea, which has been mightily struggling to salvage its failed economy and which has been greatly delayed with its ambitious plan to develop 5 major advanced weapons systems, as it announced in the 8th Party Congress held in January 2021. So what Russia is willing to provide North Korea will not be satisfactory to Kim Jong-un regime of North Korea. So there is a huge gap between Putin government of Russia and the Kim Jong-un regime of North Korea if summit meeting is going to happen.
Julie Norman, that gap that Youngshik talks about, that's a gap that we've seen before. Let's take, for example, the negotiations over the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action between Iran and the US. When Donald Trump pulled out of that deal, Iran slowly but surely raised its stakes in the game by enriching uranium to the point where they were really kind of pushing the US to see what they'd react to. Russia here could do the same thing. It could give potentially weapons technology to the Americans, and they could keep pushing it to the point and then back away. The Americans, once again, they're on the back foot here. So other than, it's almost the same question again that I asked you earlier. Is there anything that they can do that can stop anything like this?
Yeah, it's a good question, and you're exactly right. There's the short-term concerns right now for Washington in terms of just more ammunition and artillery getting to Russia for the war, but there are more of these long-term concerns as well, and especially this potential transfer of critical technology or critical knowledge to further develop North Korea's weapons systems. Obviously, the U.S. has been watching the acceleration of North Korea's testing lately. This is something that they obviously don't want to see. In terms of pressures, right, I imagine it will not be unlike kind of what we've seen in the past with Iran, where there would be different kinds of both international and bilateral pressures, especially regarding any kind of transfer of nuclear technology. But at the end of the day, it will be difficult for the U.S. to control that. What we see them doing right now instead is, of course, just trying to bolster the relations with other partners in the region, obviously Japan and South Korea most prominently. But in terms of direct pressure, it is a bit limited in where their leverage is right now.
Sergei Markov, the Russians have supported sanctions on North Korea in the past, particularly within the UN Security Council. Is this now a complete change of position for Russia?
It's, I would say, not complete change, but sufficient and dramatic change. Look what happened. First of all, as already mentioned, these sanctions against North Korea doesn't work. North Korea already have nuclear weaponry, have rocket missile system, and developing it. It's first. Secondly, we understand that now any agreement with Western countries is absolutely senseless, because Western countries, first of all, United States, behave as hooligan, as criminals on the international area. They don't respect any their own sides in some agreement. For example, Russia's got agreement on the Green Deal, and what was the result? Russia follows this Green Deal, and Western countries completely did not. Before this, we had Minsk I agreement with Ukrainian government, Minsk II agreement, and both of them collapsed because puppet of United States, Kiev repressive regime, fully violated those agreements. So what reason to have agreement with Western countries? No reason. Russia understands that more strong it will be, more its interest will be respected. Look at what happened with military government in Niger, in Africa. It was a lot of demands to this military government of Niger. But Niger answered, told them, get out, we will do what we want. And what is happening? No intervention, this Niger government respected. So Russia come to the conclusion as a result, more we will respect only own interests, and we will have no any agreement with Western countries, more our interests will be respected.
Julie, I'm going to come to you in just a second, but I want to put that point to Youngshik, Bong again. Listen, Sergei Markov says there's literally nothing you guys can do. There's nothing. I mean, is there anything that you guys can do? And it's the third time I'm asking that question. I don't think there is there? Youngshik?
Well, that is why I emphasize the proportional response as a key word that we have to pay attention if we expect any type of response coming from South Korea, Japan, and the United States for any closer security partnership and possible weapon trade taking place between Russia and North Korea. The response will be proportional. If Russia gives advanced weapon technology and the advanced weapon itself to North Korea, then a likewise response should be expected. Again, no country can force Russia as a sovereign country to do something it does not want. It's truly Russia's own choice as a sovereign country. Likewise, Russia will be held responsible for the outcomes of its own action and decision as a permanent member of the Security Council of the United Nations, which happened to vote in favor of passing all the resolutions against North Korea and other measures. So Russia as a sovereign country has all the freedom to make strategic choices, but responsibility will not disappear.
Julie, in London, this is where we're at right now. This is where we're at. We've got a need for Russia to get the type of weapons that North Korea has in abundance, and that's effectively shells. That's the way that the Ukraine war is being fought right now. It doesn't have very many partners. It can get them because it shares, although a very tiny border with North Korea, it does have a border with North Korea. If you're in US politics right now and you realize that your choices are absolutely limited, as President Joe Biden, what are you going to be thinking? What are your options going to be in terms of really getting out in front of this and turning it into a thing? Or are you going to try and just sweep it under the carpet?
Yeah, I don't think it's something that can be swept under for the reasons that we've been discussing. And what we've seen so far is a strategy that the US actually used in the early parts of the war as well, which was trying to get out ahead of a story and sort of expose what might be happening before it actually happened. So US intelligence wanted to kind of broadcast the fact that this meeting was likely going to occur, forecasting what some of the agreements might be. So that's part of the strategy right there, is just putting it out in the open. As other guests have said, these are two sovereign states. The fact that the US can't change the decisions they're making is true, but the US can obviously respond to the new realities and the consequences that they're going to be. And again, there are international frameworks and norms to stop some of these kinds of arms transfers. Again, with that said, I think the US right now is going to be doing their own bolstering of Ukraine with similar types of artillery and ammunition in terms of the war. And again, it is going to be trying to expand their own security and defense apparatus in the Pacific through their partners in the region as well.
I mean, Julie, that's very interesting, but the US has a habit of publicly saying there is a red line. Most famously, Obama said this about Syria and Syria's use of chemical weapons. Syria used chemical weapons. That red line seemed to have disappeared. It seemed to have moved slightly further north. I mean, yes, the US can supply Ukraine with similar weapons, but it's likely that they'll need to make a strong statement, and that strong statement is going to be some sort of red line. We've seen it in the past. Do you think that'll happen again?
I think, as you said, after Obama's comments during Syria, I think everyone tries to avoid the red line terminology, so to speak. But we have heard comments from Washington already in the last 24 hours saying that there would be a price to pay if this kind of arms deal went through. Again, we're not sure exactly what that would actually be, but this is language that we hear from Washington. I do think Syria was a lot different. There were a lot of different kind of options that were on the table at the time. The U.S. is just a bit more constrained with these two, as we've said, these two distinct sovereign actors who the U.S. has very little relations with either right now for different reasons, and so need to rely on different kinds of avenues. But their direct leverage is going to be difficult for this one.
Sergei Markov, are you worried that the U.S. is saying there might be a price to pay? Does that even concern Russia at all?
I don't get the exact sense of the question. Russia worry about what United States can do. United States doing everything bad for Russia, which United States can do. So United States, made dictatorship, junta to Ukraine, which, by the way, just economists published the article about political terror of this government. Even economists published the materials about political terror, which we, Russia, told all this many years. United States killed, in fact, something about 400,000 Ukrainian soldiers. They are Russians, by the way. United States prohibited using of Russian language, which is native language for the 75% of the population of Ukraine, which is because they are Russians, in fact. And what was United States can do more?
Well, I think that's the general theme of this discussion, but I want to put a very quick point, because we are running out of time, to Youngshik. Youngshik, you're part of the National Unification Ministry. We're about as far from that as ever before. But is there any leverage that South Korea has on North Korea? Is there back channels? Is there anything that's going on right now that might point to another way out of this?
The situation is not really right for any meaningful communication between the two Koreas or idea of the cultivation of economic cooperation. It appears that the Kim Jong-un regime is betting everything on the result of the upcoming presidential election in the United States, which will be November next year, hoping its favorite U.S. President, Donald Trump, is coming back. Then all these sanctions, threats, and Indo-Pacific strategy, military deterrence against North Korea might be quickly off the table. So until then, North Korea will not have any interest in cultivating dialogue and negotiation with South Korea or any other countries in that matter.
Julie, just a bit of a left field question for you. We hadn't really heard of a North Korea-Russian détente before. In fact, you know, North Korea was seen throughout Russia's history as a bit of a kind of a client state and something that was just more convenient than perhaps a trade partner. Has this come as a surprise to the US establishment?
You're right that this is a sort of turning of the tables with Russia appealing to North Korea for the weapons and whatnot. And just this kind of relationship is something that's definitely a shift from the past. With that said, again, the U.S. has been watching these movements closely, really for the last year when it was indicated that North Korea might be giving weapons at that time to the Wagner Group. So it's been on the radar for a while, but as you noted, it's many in Washington are trying to frame this as it shows the need of Russia right now to be looking at states like North Korea, looking at states like Iran, because their own weapons are depleting and because sanctions are working. I think that's a pretty optimistic spin on it. But realistically, they're seeing that, look, there is a changing in some of the geopolitics right now, the closeness of Russia and North Korea, and especially if, again, if China leans into this for joint drills or for other kinds of cooperation, that's a kind of solidarity that the U.S. would not want to see.
Sergei Markov, just very quickly, there is a practical element here of having to get stuff from Russia into North Korea. It's a very small rail line and a 17-kilometer border. Is it possible that you can get this deal done on a practical level?
On a practical level, Russia and North Korea has a common border, and the trade can be very easily made. Of course, it wouldn't be secret because almost nothing secret in the modern world. But this deal could be implemented without problems. The problem is to make the deal, because North Korea is a very unique country, which is has not so many deals with any countries. North Korea following own strategy and almost no experience of the world to having some deal with North Korea government. So it's a problem. Is it possible at all? We don't know yet.
I want to thank all our guests, Youngshik, Bong, Julie Norman and Sergei Markov. And I want to thank you as well for watching. Now, you can see the programme anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you can also join the conversation on X. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Imran Khan, and the whole team here, bye for now.